Lisa here with Terminally Curious. Today we're going to take a look at how we can use GitHub to host with GitHub Pages a repository as a web page. This is super useful if you need a portfolio in order to show off your work, or just to be able to share things that you're working on, or if you've got a project that you want to have a public-facing page for. So first thing you're going to need is a GitHub username and password, an account with GitHub. If you don't have one of those, I have another video that talks about how to get started with Git and how to find your way around GitHub. Take a look at that, get your GitHub account information, and head back over here. Okay, so I'm logged into GitHub here and I'm in a repository. This repository is called my Quick Portfolio. This is a template repository. I will link to it in the description of this video. The idea here is that it is a template in order for you to be able to very quickly spin up a portfolio or an about page, okay, for a project. Now, I did shout out to Ivanka. This is a repository that I forked from Ivanka, so thank you to her. And I hope you will fork it from me as well. Now, what is a fork? A fork is essentially a branch that belongs to a different user or organization, or has entirely, additional functionality, a different version flavor of the software or of the project. Okay, so in order to fork, I come back to Ivanka's version so I can show you. There is a fork button here in the right above the code button. Okay, if I use that drop down, you can see here I already have an existing fork, but you would create a new fork on my template, okay, or on Ivanka's, I suppose. But you would create a new fork, and what that would do is create a copy of the repository, but instead of being owned by me, your username would be here. Okay, so you would then have a repository that is u/Quick Portfolio, and that's where you would be here. It does take just a second to show up once you say to go ahead and fork. Now I'm going to do work today in a copy of this repository, so this one stays as a template for you. So I'm going to create a new repository copying that locally for me. And by locally, I mean in my user. All right, so I'm going to call my repository name, I can't call it Quick Portfolio, so I'm going to call mine About Terminally Curious. Now, as I'm naming my repository, note that there aren't any spaces in there. Mine will be more of About, an About page. So there you can see it really doesn't take GitHub very long to create a new repository at all, especially when it's copying. This doesn't have a ton of content in it, so when you're copying a smaller repository like this. So now, once you have the repository, a copy of the Quick Portfolio repository under your username, so you've got your own fork, the first thing you're going to want to be able to do is personalize it to you, right? So instead of calling it Quick Portfolio, you want to call it by your username or by your name, or change it to have a more meaningful title. In order to do that, we're going to change the name of the repository itself, and that is under Settings. So up here along the top, we've got these different kind of tabs that allow us to navigate around in our repository, and this last one is Settings. When we click on that, under General, the very first thing is the repository name. So if I had not created a copy and called it About Terminally Curious, you could change the name right here. You just type the name in there. Again, remember, no spaces, and then click Rename, and it should apply. If you wanted to be able to set a repository to act as a template, like let's say you always start a project with the same 3 files, you could create a template repository, check this box, and then regularly create copies of that template to start new projects. Very handy time-saving thing there. Okay. Now the next piece we want to do is tell GitHub that we really want to display this repository as a web page and not just as a bunch of code. So in order to do that, here in the left navigation, we're going to come down to Pages, and this is where we can set that. Okay, so by default, it's going to build and deploy a web page based on a branch. Works for me. Okay, now what branch should it use? Well, at this point, we only have the one branch, the master branch. So we're going to specify that master branch and then say save. I do like that there is the option to choose the branch though. So let's say I wanted my portfolio to be different based on a job I had just applied for. I could have a branch of my portfolio that is specific to that job application, switch to that when I know they're going to be looking at my portfolio, and then easily switch back to a more generic one. All right, when I say save, what happens in the background is that GitHub now says, oh, you want this to be a web page? We're going to use the tools at our disposal, a tool named Jekyll, we'll talk more about that in a minute, to spin up, to essentially create that web page based on the content you have here in your repository. They also give us an option here to name a custom domain. So GitHub is going to give us a domain, a URL essentially based on their domain in order to be able to share this page publicly with others, okay, in order to be able to access it. If we wanted something that was a little more friendly, all right, let's say I wanted this to be joesmith.com, okay, I wanted to point to this particular portfolio. If I had purchased that domain, I could then put that domain name in here and it would tell GitHub that I want that name, that domain, to point to this particular page that is being generated. Okay, so a nice functionality to have. Now, I am going to, this takes just a minute to spin up. I'm going to hop up to General and back to Pages to see if it has worked. And sure enough, it now says my site is live and it gives us the URL. Okay, so we can see it's my username.github.io and then the name of my repository as I named it. If I click on that link, I navigate to a live page based on that repository. Now this is a template, so nothing too fancy. I see John Doe and his nice picture there and some of the projects that he's worked on. But it is live. So from here we can customize it to be particular to us, okay? To do that, I'm going to head back into code. And the first thing I'm going to work to do is update that John Doe's image there, his picture, to my own logo. So to do that, I'm going to come under Images. Now this section here, this is where all the code and content of our repository lives, okay? So Images, this is going to hold any images that I have for this portfolio, for this page. Logo is the one that is displaying where John Smith's picture was, okay? So I'm going to add here an image. To do that, I'm going to come up to the Add File dropdown and upload a file. And I'm just going to drag it here from off screen. I've got an image for Terminally Curious with a partially transparent background. So I'm going to add that, just drop it in. I can see the file uploaded. And then I have the opportunity to commit these changes to the master branch. Now remember, we've got that multi-step save process here in Git. So the file has been saved when it was uploaded, but in order to make those changes permanent to the branch, I have to commit those changes. That's the second step of that process, okay? So to commit the changes, I'm going to give it a commit message, added logo, and then commit those changes to the master branch. That also should kick off GitHub Pages to let me know you need to to let GitHub know it needs to rebuild that page. And that update process does take just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the look and feel of this page, this portfolio, and how we can customize the look and feel as well as the content. So the first thing we would want to do is update like this title and some of the links, like link to, your LinkedIn profile instead of John Doe's, and then get some of your projects in there displaying. So to do that, I'm going to come into my repository, into code, and I'm going to take a look at this _config.yaml file. Okay, now this file is used by a tool called Jekyll in order to spin up the web page based on what is entered into this file as well as a couple of others. Okay, so here we can see it's got title, colon, and then John Doe, and that is what appears as the title of that page. Okay, well, we're going to change that. Oh, and in order to change it, I have to go in to actually edit the file. So I'm going to click on the pencil here to edit this file, and I can edit it right here in my browser. So I will update this as well as a few other things. So then instead of pointing to John Doe's picture, which was logo.png, I want to point to the one that I just uploaded. Now this is a relative URL. What does that mean? It means relative to this file that I'm in right now, the underscore config.yaml file, I want to head into the images directory and then have it look at icon underscore trans. Okay, so I'm going to change this relative URL, this relative path. Instead of images logo, I'm going to have it point to icon underscore trans. Okay. And what this is saying is from your current location, go into a folder called images, and then in that folder, the / look for that particular file. I'm going to update this description. Leave off the exclamation mark on that one. And then this particular line, this is the one that controls the look and feel of our page. So by default, we have the minimal theme applied, but there are other themes that GitHub Pages supports. So one that I know of is the modernist, but I'll link to a list of some of the other themes that are supported as well. You also can add custom themes, but that does require some additional files and coding. Okay, so I'll link in the description to a list of other available themes. Okay, and then it lets us know we're using Jekyll and that there is Google Analytics support if you want it. Once I'm happy with this file, I can commit the changes and update. Yep, that makes sense to me. So I'm going to commit those changes to the master branch, and that should kick off another update to this page. Let's see if it's updated at all yet. No. And there we go. Now we can see we've got an update. So the modernist theme applied. We can see it looks very different, but our title is different along with our iCode description. But this part here, I didn't see anything in that YAML file about these images or portfolio, and they have stayed the same. So what is driving this content here? If we head back into our code, we've got another file, the index.md, that drives that portion of the page. Okay, so here we are able to make changes to this file as well, but it is a little bit different. If I come into edit, we'll see it is a Markdown file. That's what the .md stands for. And Markdown is a syntax that allows us to control how some text displays or how things display on the page. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Markdown, that's another link I'll include in the description for you. Like for example, here at the top, these 2 pound symbols, that indicates that this is a heading and it's a second level heading. Okay, because there are 2 pound symbols. And then we can see that displayed here, right? Second level heading. And then these 3 hyphens, that's going to indicate a horizontal rule, which is this line right here. Okay, then after that, it should say category name 1 as a heading. Yep, a 3rd level heading, so a little bit different than the look and feel of portfolio. Okay, so then we also can include links here, and that's what this line is doing. The square brackets are going to indicate inside the square brackets, this is the text that the user will see on the page. And then inside the parentheses, this is the relative path to where that link should go. Okay, so in this case, it's going to sample page, which is another MD, another Markdown page, to display that to the user. So if I click on it, looks like my sample page didn't display, but we could easily fix that. Okay, makes sense because I don't think they've got the full path there. At any rate, rather than linking to the sample page Markdown, I think I would like to link to the repository for the quick portfolio. So I'm going to change this a little bit. Instead of portfolio, for me, it's a projects. It's a project. And instead of having a 2nd level heading, I think we'll just cut straight to the chase. In the square brackets is what I want the user to see. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put a link, a URL. So I'm going to grab the URL of this one right here and display that here. I'm going to leave one sample image there and call that good. So I'm going to commit the changes. This is going to be one step that both saves my file and commits it to the branch. So I'm updating the index. Sounds good to me. That should kick off an update again to our page right here. Now, one final thing, so we've talked about look and feel of the page. We do have the ability to control the actual layout of the page as well, but that's kind of an advanced topic. It is built in, however, to this repository. So if we head under layouts, there is a default.html, and this is driving the layout of the page, okay? In cooperation with Jekyll and those themes, we control how that page actually lays out. So if you're comfortable with Jekyll, with JavaScript, with HTML, absolutely you can make changes to this here as well. All right, well, it looks like we've got an update here to our portfolio. Is our link to our repository work? Hey, it does. Excellent. So that should be enough to help you get started building out a page or a portfolio, an about page, a project page, or a portfolio using GitHub Pages. I'm excited to see what you do with it. Please send me copies, send me a link to your about page. I'd love to see it. If this has been helpful to you, please like and subscribe. I'd love to see you next time.